Tonight on Investigative Reports.
We've got killers out there whose only goal is to rack up the new high score and get on the cover of Time magazine.
We profile America's SWAT teams.
That's what this whole unit does for a living. We go through that door and ultimately face the problem one-on-one. It's a chess game, and ultimately we win.
The new dangers they face.
Now, I look at the skyline of the city of Los Angeles and I'm saying, I wonder what building won't be there 10 years from now. And I think that's a good question to ask if we don't take care of business, because that'll exactly be what happens.
The SWAT team will actually go out and they'll do what's called an advance on the location. They'll drive the neighborhood. They'll gather information about neighboring houses, who lives in the area, are there any sentries, what is the layout of the house, are there any fences, dogs, kids, elderly people.
Okay, this morning we're going to be serving a warrant. It's going to be at the...
Investigative reports will accompany the LA County Sheriff's Department as they prepare to serve a high-risk warrant to a local drug dealer at his home. In Los Angeles, a young patrol officer named Ron McCarthy heard of the Texas Tower Massacre and realized Charles Whitman was just a harbinger of the dangers to come. McCarthy would be one of LAPD's first SWAT operators.
The Texas Tower and Charles Whitman, that is what is termed now an active shooter event. That was followed closely by an individual called Mark Essex, who climbed up on top of the Howard Johnson's Hotel in New Orleans and shot and killed numerous people and wounded many more. And that incident was followed by James Huberty, the suspect that went into the McDonald's in San Ysidro and became a mass murderer with the killing of a number of people and children and mothers. And the reason that I mentioned those incidents is, even though they were occurring on a irregular basis, but regular enough that we all remember them and know that they were horrendously violent and the cost and the carnage was incredibly high, there were still people that fought the SWAT concept, fought the idea that police had to respond.
These incidents demonstrated to law enforcement how much mayhem and terror one suicidal gunman could inflict.
Tethered or anything like that.
Along with tactics, the history of SWAT has been one of equipment. A constantly evolving arsenal of weapons, protective gear, and surveillance gear, trying to stay one step ahead of the bad guys.
Well, let's start with the body armor. How has that improved?
Now, some of the developers have developed body armor to the level where they will actually defeat rifle fire, military rifles. AK-47s, assault rifles with .223 round. Before, that wasn't possible. This armor is now light enough where it can actually be worn and not affect the operator.
With lighter armor comes heavier caliber weapons for SWAT teams and breaching explosives. Also better eyes and ears in the form of infrared scopes and miniature cameras that can actually see through walls and around corners.
So all these things are designed for a new mission and a new enemy, in addition to the old.
It allows us to operate in different environments, light, dark, close, distance. We anticipate that we will be engaging terrorist suspects. Well, to be honest with you, we're not sure exactly where we'll be engaging them, so we're preparing for all environments.
I'll turn left, going over the body! I'll turn left!
Although SWAT teams have only recently begun training for how to confront a terrorist threat, there have been many incidents that present, if not the same, at least a very similar scenario. In his 25 years with the FBI, counterterrorism expert Clint Van Zandt has seen it all.
Although international terrorism is relatively new in the United States, law enforcement has dealt with homegrown domestic terrorism for years. We have the Timothy McVeighs, we have the Ted Kaczynskis, we have the Animal Liberation Front, we have the environmental groups, we have the anti-abortion groups. So domestic terrorism is nothing new to the authorities.
Over the past decades, the most disturbing aspect of homegrown terrorism has played out inside our nation's schools. Disturbing because not only are children the victims, but the active shooters the SWAT team faces may be children themselves. A single word crystallizes the problem: Columbine. On April 20th, 1999, seniors Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold stormed Columbine High School. They carried with them 2 assault weapons, 2 shotguns, and dozens of homemade pipe bombs.
Ready. They're going in.
SWAT teams began to enter the school around noon, a little more than 30 minutes after the first shots.
They're good kids.
You had alarms going off, you had strobe lights going off, you had hissing of all the sprinkler systems that were going at that time. You could not hear any kids. The bells and the alarms that were going off were deafening. Even the kids that saw us would not get up and open the doors, even though that obviously we're dressed in SWAT gear and looked like police. Not one of them throughout that whole building would get up and ever open a door for us. I think they were just that scared.
Move! Take them out!
Clearly now we know that response to those type of situations should not be left up to a SWAT team. Some of the first responding officers must have the training and equipment to respond to those deadly threats and stop the action. So the biggest thing that came out of Columbine was this massive training initiative to reinforce, retrain, provide new tactics and techniques to the first responding police officer to an incident like that.
At Columbine, the first officers on the scene had neither the training nor the weapons necessary to take on a gunman shooting at them with a rifle. After Columbine, first responding officers, as well as the first members of a SWAT team to arrive at such a scene, are given the authority to take that initiative. In the parlance of SWAT, it is called rapid deployment.
In the normal day-to-day tactical arena, we are very, very methodical about how we do business, and there are some rules, if you will, about not passing rooms that have been unsecured, haven't been cleared, not passing open doors, not advancing past people that are down. And in this rapid deployment environment, where you have a shooter inside a target-rich environment, if we take the time to do the standard things, that passage of time represents the potential and or actual loss of life to more innocent victims.
When you hear the shots, you have to move to the sound of the guns. And this business of marching to the sounds of the guns, moving rapidly to the sound of the guns, is something that only a certain spirit can nurture and develop. And the way
Dave Grossman is an expert on warfare and the psychological effects of killing. He likens the mindset of today's SWAT team member to that of a soldier in combat. And tactics aside, it is this spirit and willingness to put one's life on the line that ultimately determines the effectiveness of any given operation.
And the way you develop that spirit is by having a team of comrades who know what you're doing, depend on one another, who cover one another, by having the proper equipment, the proper armor, the proper weapons, and move rapidly towards the sound of the guns. And that's the only way, with this new brand of mass murderers, that we're going to be able to deal with what happens.
The situation that we're in now is going to last for decades. I wish it wouldn't, but I believe my grandchildren are going to be living in a world where they're not going to be able to relax because they're Americans. To balance domestic law enforcement response with their ability to train themselves to be effective against terrorists, both homegrown and international. And there will be a balancing act.